Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So, Basia put me up to a challenge. I'm going to talk about this for a minute because, usually when I ask someone to give me some information about them and I do the due diligence, it kind of makes the show. But I had to be kind of like a little bit more of a detective with her background because obviously she's kind of like hidden on the internet a little bit. But we find out some things about her here and there. So, we'll expose those as we continue with this particular episode. The nickname that I'm going to give her kind of relates back to one of her businesses. So I'm going to call her the Streetcam Boss. So the floor is yours. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about you and what we're going to be talking about today?
So my name is Basia. I'm 19. I started my first business when I was 18 doing photography. I work with restaurants and as of right now, I work with one restaurant. I do pictures for them, but I print them out and I sell it to their customers. So it's really great in restaurants. I get a lot of tourists. I also host a business podcast, but I work for somebody doing that just because I was bored Monday through Friday. My business only operates on the weekends. So I thought, fuck it, let me host a podcast.
Very cool. Very cool. So, well, one of the things that I did find out about you, I mean, obviously you've traveled the world a little bit. You did some traveling here and there, but what I did find out about like your world traveling is that back in 2019, you did a Kenya trip.
Yes.
So I want you to talk like, was that like a missionary trip? Like, what was the story behind it? Because it looks like you had some really good photo shoots. You had a really good time during that trip.
Yeah. So I took that trip when I was, I think, 16. It was a missions trip with my church. So we went and we taught a lot of the people in the village math, English. We helped them build a library. So yeah. I also got to go on safari, and back during that time, I was way more invested in doing freelance photography and doing more, like photo shoots and stuff like that. So I got to capture a lot of that trip that way.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite pictures from that trip was it was the sepia shots that you did, and I think it was one with this kid with a basketball, and he just had like this little DV.
Yeah.
That's probably like one of my favorite out of that particular shots.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about you were 16 and 19. And it's a beautiful thing because, like, nowadays we're hearing about kids being younger and younger getting into business. So, I want to talk about like your upbringing for a little bit. I mean, obviously, you come from a Polish background, right?
Mhm.
But are either one of your parents entrepreneurs? Like, where are you getting this entrepreneurial insight from?
So I guess my mom is more entrepreneurial than my dad is. My dad was in the Navy. He's very much, go by the book. He needs to have a set of rules to follow. He doesn't think outside the box too much. My mom does. She started her own business a couple of years ago, but growing up, she encouraged me to try to come up with side hustles and find ways to make money. So I was a big Lego kid. I loved going to the Lego store. I loved putting Lego sets together, and we lived really close to a Lego store. So every first Tuesday of the month, they would do this free mini model build. The first couple of months that we went, we built it, we kept it. But after that, my mom was like, oh my gosh, we should take these sets and sell them on eBay. So that's exactly what we did. That's how I started off. I was homeschooled for majority of my life. So I would start going with my mom to homeschool like expos, and we'd buy used books for super, super cheap and go and resell those on eBay too. And then Polish people are very we care a lot about appearances, and we care a lot about, we can't buy stuff that's used because we feel like it makes us look bad. So I was 9 years old and I was like, Mom, like I really want to go to a garage sale. And she's like, no, we're not poor. We can go get new stuff. We don't have to go to garage sales. So I was like, Mom, I really want to go to a garage sale. And so we started going, and we were actually finding a lot of things that we could go and resell on eBay. So as a kid, I started probably, I was maybe 7 or so. That's how I started my entrepreneurial journey.
It's really cool. So I think you say your dad, he's ex-Navy. So let me paint a picture and correct me if I could be wrong. Like, did your parents happen to meet via sailing? Because I mean, I think your mom loves sailing or loves sailboats to a certain extent. So like, how did that come to fruition?
So actually, my parents were both born and raised in the same town in Poland. They went to kindergarten. They went to kindergarten together. They went to school for a good couple of years. My mom ended up going to school in Germany after, I think, in middle school. And then my dad moved to the US when he was about 10 or 11. And so they re-met when they were in their 20s. And then they went out to go get coffee. They were like family friends. And then that's where they fell in love, and my mom moved here to be with him.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very interesting. It's very cool. So
Yeah.
let's talk about like the six-figure podcast, like the one that you said you like you actually interviewed me on it, and I think you're a great host. I mean, considering that you're young, you kind of know what you want, you know what you're doing. Let's talk about like obviously you saying it was an opportunity for you to kind of jump on the bandwagon to become a podcast host. How did that come into reality?
So I used to, like I said, I started the photography business. It was only operating Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. It still is.
Mhm.
I was bored Monday through Friday. And so I was like, you know what? Like I could get another job. I could go and find something remote, do something online. And I was looking into remote closing. And I saw, remote closing coming up on TikTok. I was like, this is interesting. And so I decided one Monday morning, I woke up and I was like, I'm going to research remote closing today. And I go on Instagram and I get an ad for somebody who has a remote closing course. And when you're done with the course, they set you up with a job. So I was like, okay, like this is sick. Like this is exactly what I was going to research anyway. Like I'm going to look into this. So I ended up signing up for the program. And that's how I work for the podcast. When I finished it, that's what my teacher set me up with, was the podcast. So I'm a podcast setter.
Hmm. I think it's definitely interesting. I mean, the more and more you learn about podcasting, the more and more there's opportunities that you would not have thought of prior till podcasting became mainstream.
Yes.
And I think that kind of goes to like one of your quotes. I think one of your quotes is like some things get worse before they get better. And I want you to kind of talk about that for a minute. Like, why was that one of your favorite quotes? Like, did you experience something? Or was that just something that you just kind of like learned as you're growing up?
So I used to live in Chicago. I moved to Houston a little over a year ago. I was in a horrible toxic relationship. I had mental, emotional abuse, the whole shebang. I was so scared to leave him to move to Houston. I had quit my job for him because he made me feel guilty about having a job. And even while I lived in Houston, I was no longer with him. I was still dead set on not having a job for some reason. And I was convinced that that was the way to go, that I was going to figure something out. It took me a very long time to figure something out. I ended up having to take out a hardship delay for 2 months on my car because I was so determined. At the time, I thought I was going to start a drop shipping store, and I thought like this is going to be it. Um, but I think because everything went to shit the way that it did,
Mhm.
I was able to learn a lot more lessons, and I developed a lot more grit and drive than I think I would have if I had just moved and gotten a job and everything went smoothly.
Hmm.
So I guess whenever I feel like right now I'm going through another period of my life where I'm wondering what's the next thing gonna be. And
Mhm.
so I think back and it's like, okay, well, I last year around this time I had no fucking clue what I was gonna do. Things had to get really shitty in order for me to figure it out. And after I took out that hardship delay, I decided, okay, I think it's time to find a job. And the job that I found was doing what my business is now. So it gave me that inspiration to start my first business.
So I'm happy you brought that up. So like now we're spinning up into, photography, right? And obviously, you've been shooting. We talked about you traveling the world and as a kid and as an adolescent and growing up with a camera in your hand. So obviously, by default, if someone's seen your life, they would have think maybe photography would have been your thing. But when did you make that decision to say, okay, you know what? I'm not only going to just use the camera for fun, but I'm going to use it for a business.
So actually, like you said, I've been doing photography for a while, and everybody would tell me, Basha, you need to start a photography business. You need to start a photography business. And I was so dead set on not doing it. But I think honestly that job was kind of the turning point for me because I saw how little it costs to start it. It only operated 3 days a week. One location makes an average American salary. So I was like, you know what? Like, honestly, fuck it. It's not that expensive to start. I might as well. So now I have one employee. She works for me, so I don't even have to go to work on the weekends anymore. So yeah, I would say that was the turning point for me. Where like this is like, okay, maybe those other people were right, and I should start a photography business.
So I mean, I think in your early days of starting this business, you had a particular niche with Mustangs, right? So I want to talk about like, so if there was a 5.0, like let's say a Boss Mustang versus a Cobra, which one are you going to side
I'd have to say the boss.
on? Mm, mm.
I wouldn't
So
say
what?
that it was a niche though that I specifically focused on. It was I had gotten my Mustang when I turned 18. That
Mm,
was my goal for a year, and I accomplished it right a week after I turned 18. I was telling myself the entire past year, I'm going to get this car for my 18th birthday. And I did it. And but in the meantime, I had been making a lot of friends with other people who had Mustangs. So that just
mm.
happened to be who I was around. But I ended up expanding a little bit into BMW, into did a couple Challengers. So it was just a lot of my friends' cars that I was doing. My
Mm.
boyfriend at the time also had a Mustang.
So I mean, what was it about Mustang? I mean, considering that there's all these different cars in the world, considering that you have like a Polish background, and you could have been looking at European imports, like why American muscle Mustang out the box?
I love the way they look. I love the way they feel. I've worked at car wrapping shops. Like I said, I've shot a lot of different cars. I've never felt quite at home like I have in a Mustang.
Hmm.
Yeah. It just feels like me.
So I mean, that's a good keyword. You said it feels like you. So if you could define yourself in just 3 to 5 words, what would those 3 to 5 words be?
I would say I'm ambitious, I'm loyal, I'm very driven. I like to think that I'm charismatic, and I'm also free spirited.
Hmm.
I guess that's technically 6 words. One of them has a hyphen in it though, so it should be good.
That's hilarious. So let's talk about like your business for a minute. So you're saying that your business only runs 3 days a week, right? And you have an employee that does the work for you. How did the cars then roll into like the restaurant aspect of it?
They really didn't, to be honest. I mean, originally I had started Streetcam Photography to do automotive photography. I thought that that was gonna be my thing. I thought that's what I was gonna stick with when I first moved here. That's kind of what I was doing for money for a little bit. I posted a ton of Facebook groups saying like, "Hey, I'm doing automotive photography." I posted a ton of my pictures, get people interested. And then around that time was when I found the restaurant photography job, the business idea that I kind of stole from them. So I had a different name set up for that business. And then I thought, you know what, like maybe I'll just start like a photography conglomerate and I'll just call it all street camp photography, and I'll do weddings, I'll do like senior shoots, I'll do family portraits, things like that. Um, and then I decided to let all of that go and focus just on the restaurant photography.
So what do you actually shoot with the restaurants? I mean, obviously there's different, I mean, are you shooting more of like the cuisine? Are you shooting the environment? Like what kind of shots are you mostly known for?
Have you been on a cruise ship?
Yeah.
So you know how when you're on a cruise ship, I haven't been, but I've been told that my business is very similar to that. When you're on a cruise ship, they take a ton of your pictures and then they print them out, and later you have the chance to go and buy them.
Hmm.
So that's basically what I do, but for restaurants. So my employee will approach the table, ask them if they'd like one free picture. She takes a group picture, she'll do some couples, maybe she'll do the kids, maybe she'll do one side of the table, another side of the table, and then she'll go back. I've got a little kiosk set up with a printer, a laptop, paper frames. Um, Obviously, media and ink for the printer and stuff too, but that's besides the point. She'll go and print them out, and then at the end of the meal, she'll go and give them the free one, but she'll offer the additional ones for sale as well. So that's really what I do. It's great for people who are celebrating things, graduations, birthday parties, anniversaries, family reunions, that kind of thing.
So I would think that that's scalable because I mean, obviously you're talking about food chains, you're talking about multiple different locations. So like what's your plans as far as scaling the business?
So if I'm being completely honest, I
Mm.
don't think I have plans to scale the business. I just came back from a trip to Vegas where I thought that was going to be the thing. I thought that's what I was missing was maybe I was just in the wrong location. I can drive around Houston and I can tell you exactly which places I've been to and talked to, and I've talked to most of them, and it's either been a no or it's been a chain. Chains are really hard to get through to. It's really hard to get somebody from corporate to listen to you, especially when you're as young as I am.
Mm.
So I thought Vegas was going to be a thing, and I told myself Vegas is the last straw. If Vegas doesn't work out, I'm going to leave this business alone, and I'm going to find something else to do. So I'm
Mm.
at this point now where I'm thinking about honestly selling the business. My end goal is business acquisition. I'd love to own an acquisition company. Um, yeah, so I'm kind of thinking about selling the business and using that capital to turn around and buy something else.
I mean, that's definitely interesting. I mean, you're talking about acquisition. So essentially, what you're saying is that out of the 3 days a week, you have enough revenue to where obviously it's feeding you, you have surplus, you have an employee, but importantly, you have a database of clientele and you have a formula that's been working for you for, I guess, how long you've been doing this now?
About a year.
About a year. Which is crazy because I mean, at the end of the day, you think about it, and like my next question would be like, how long did it take you to get to where you are? And I always be facetious with this question because the average person, they'll usually say 10, 20 years, but you're not even that age yet. So
Yeah.
like like really and truly, like just talk about from start to finish, how long did it take you to get to where you are?
Um, all right. So I started the job where I learned about this whole restaurant photography in the first place. It was March of last year. By end of April, I had found a restaurant to work with me. My first weekend, I made 2 grand, and then since then, it's been making me good money. So it really took me probably from learning about this whole business in the first place to making a profit 2.5 months,
Hmm.
something like that.
So if you're going to take it to sell it to someone, like what's your plan for executing that? I mean, obviously you have to talk about the equity value, you have to talk about the evaluation. Have you went down that path as of yet?
Honestly, this is an idea I came up with probably 2 or 3 days ago. So I'm thinking even if I get just the annual revenue, I would
Mhm.
be happy with that. That gives me more than enough to go and get a business that makes at least what mine is making.
Hmm. It's definitely interesting. I mean, the fact that you're starting out and you're not even like 21 is definitely it's a beautiful thing. First of all, so I'm happy that we made that connection and to see that you're doing what you want to do at such a young age. It's a gold mine in itself because I mean you have time on your side, right?
Yeah.
So like the next thing I want to talk about, like in the short period of time that you've been a successful entrepreneur and you found like things that you want to do and now you want to jump into other spaces, if you can go back, right? Let's say in the last 10 years, right? From age 10 until now, is there something that you could think of that maybe you'd want to tweak or modify to make things happen a lot faster if you could do it all over again?
I wish that I had paid attention more sooner. So the only reason that I even thought about doing the same business as my previous employer was because I was paying attention and I was looking for opportunities and I was looking for the next thing. I was looking for something to jump into, something to get my feet at least wet in the business world. I think if I had done that sooner, I'd be a lot farther ahead because for the longest time, I would go and I'd work jobs and it's like, yeah, I'm just here to clock in, let me do my job and then walk out.
Mhm.
I didn't pay attention.
Hmm. Hmm. That's definitely interesting. So let's just talk about like your routines, right? So I mean, obviously, like you're young, but do
Mhm.
you have a morning routine or morning rituals established as of yet?
Honestly, no. Honestly, no. I wake up, I check my messages, check my email, check my bank account. Like I said, I've got the podcast. So clock in, I go through all of my morning tasks for the podcast, do whatever interviews I have to do, and then I go and I relax. I don't know, I don't wake up at 5 in the morning and meditate or go to the gym or go and make, I
Mhm.
don't know, a smoothie or go for a walk. I don't know, maybe I should. Maybe that would be beneficial for me, but as of right now, I don't feel the need to put that kind of pressure on myself just because that's what a lot of other entrepreneurs do.
Hmm. So I mean, obviously, like with your family setup, right? I mean, your mom and your dad, like, do you guys have like family dinners where you kind of discuss what you're doing as far as your business versus I think your dad, I think he works for like Oracle, and you were saying that your mom is kind of an ongoing entrepreneur, but the reality is, are you having like these one-to-one conversations with them to get insight from them?
We don't do family dinners, just because we all have different dietary restrictions and habits. But in the mornings, my parents usually are outside on the porch. I still live with my parents, but they're usually outside on the porch drinking coffee. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a daily thing, but I do go out there sometimes. I joke that they're like my board of directors. And I go and I
Hmm.
sit down and I tell them what my ideas are, what I'm thinking about doing next. And I do the same thing for my mom too. She's got a skincare company on Amazon. So sometimes she needs help and she needs my perspective. My dad does his best.
Hmm. I think it's definitely interesting. So I mean, like words of insight for a parent, right? And let's say like you're not that much older than my kids, right? So my kids are like we have one that's 17 and the other one he literally just turned 17, right? So
Mhm.
what insight would you give to not only those kids but to parents raising kids that potentially have the capabilities of becoming entrepreneurs?
Encourage them. Don't put too much pressure on them because I promise you they're putting more than enough pressure on themselves. If they're on the entrepreneurial journey, they're doing more than enough to themselves. They're beating themselves up enough in their heads that you don't have to do it too. And for the kids themselves, keep trying. Keep trying different things. Now is the time to try different things. Don't beat yourself up for not finding your thing yet. Yeah, that's what I'd say. Keep trying.
Hmm. And again, are you a big book reader by chance? Are there any books that you would like to recommend that you've read that probably helped you get to where you are?
No, honestly, no. The thing that got me where I am is just trial and error. I was never a book person. I don't have the attention span to sit there and read the book. I have to read it over and over and over again for it to register in my head, and I don't have the attention span for that.
So are you more like you getting some of your information more so from like YouTube or podcasting? Like where are you getting your absorbing of information from?
So might be controversial, but TikTok. I really like watching TikToks. Like, I follow a lot of different entrepreneurs on TikTok and get their points of view just from their videos. YouTube is good too. I used to watch a lot of Dan Pena. Love Dan Pena.
Hmm.
Grant Cardone. Gary V. He's also great. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, but I also host a podcast, so I talk to business owners every single day. I talk to 6 and 7 figure entrepreneurs, and I talk to them about the mistakes that they've made, which is also it also has been great.
Hmm. So I mean, obviously, I think that there's a duality to that, right? I mean, obviously, you have an inside because you're doing podcasting to have the inside of entrepreneurs at that level, which most 19-year-olds probably don't have access to. So
Yeah.
essentially, you have coaches on demand.
Yes, I do.
That's pretty. So with everything that you're doing, right? I mean, do you have any general plans for, let's say, double your lifespan 20 years from now? Where do you see yourself?
This might also be controversial, and maybe it's the wrong thing to say, but I'm going to be honest. I don't know that I have a plan for 20 years. I think that life changes a lot, and it's proven itself to me that it changes a lot. I don't know what my I don't know what my life will look like in the next 2 weeks. So I think in the next 20 years, I'm going to be doing exactly what I'm doing right now and just going with the flow with whatever life throws at me. I'd like to be a
Kind of go
millionaire though.
back to, well, yeah, yeah. I mean that's the plan. And then once you're a millionaire, then you want to be 10, then 100, then a billionaire, right? So I mean that's just the legacy that comes with it. Another thing that I found out about you, and again, I could be wrong, but it looks like you went to a lot of jazz festivals in a period of
Yes.
time. Is that
Yes.
because you love jazz, or was it kind of your parents dragging you to that?
Oh my gosh, it was neither. So my uncle, he's my godfather. He was my dad's best friend in high school. He's a photographer, and he tried to help me get more exposure in the photographers community. So he would invite
Mm.
me to these Polish jazz festivals. I hate jazz. I hate jazz with a passion. Most of the people there were horrible, but it was a really great chance to practice shooting in lowly lit settings. So,
Mhm.
and then I got to meet a lot of people. I took lessons with one photographer for a little bit, and I met him through that jazz festival.
It's very cool. I didn't expect you to say that because I mean, I was like, it's a lot of jazz. I was got to be a story behind it. So I mean, obviously, that's an interesting story for sure. So with like tools of the trade, right? I mean, obviously, every entrepreneur has their bags of apps or their bags of tools or systems. What tools do you use that you would not be able to do what you do if you didn't have access to them?
Google Calendar, Instagram, TikTok.
So with Instagram, is Instagram more so like your lead magnet, or is it more so showcasing your portfolio?
It's showcasing my portfolio, but also I would have not been able to find the course that got me this podcast position if it wasn't for me going on Instagram and the ad coming up.
Hmm.
It's great for when I'm researching a restaurant that I want to potentially work with. I look at their Instagram and see how Instagrammable is the place. If the more Instagrammable the place, the more likely they are to agree to having me work with them. Just because their whole goal is for people to take pictures there. So that's also been really, really helpful. I get to see the layout of the restaurant through their
Mhm.
Instagram profiles as well. It was also really helpful back when I did a lot more automotive photography.
So let's talk about it. You're saying Instagrammable, right? So is it more so like the backdrops are beautiful? Like, I mean, obviously you're not going into McDonald's trying to get McDonald's headshots, right? So
Right.
let's just talk about your ideal avatar as far as the commercial level of restaurants. Like what restaurant flavor are you looking for?
Restaurant flavor.
Yep.
Well, by Instagrammable, I mean, they put a lot of effort into the design of the place. All of the colors are cohesive. They have like a flower wall as a backdrop for pictures. Or the place that I currently work with, Pier 6 in San Leon, they have like an oyster wall. And it has, with the neon lights, it says, "The world is your oyster." So a lot of people like having their pictures taken there. Just places that are just, when you look at them inside, are beautiful.
Hmm. So it's more so like the decorative backdrops if they're
Yes.
usable. So when you're actually walking in the restaurant and somebody's at a table, do you actually say, "Hey guys, do you want to take a picture over here," or do you actually take a picture at the table? Like, how does that usually work when someone's eating?
Well, we don't approach them when they're eating. We approach them when they have their menus out. So we are as minimally invasive as possible. We'll approach them, and if they want a picture at the table, then great. If they'll usually suggest themselves, so if they want to take a picture by the oyster wall, or if they want to go outside, they have a bunch of swings. So sometimes people will ask to have their pictures taken on the swings, but usually we'll do it at the table.
Hmm. It's fascinating because I mean it's one of those things where you think about business, you think about restaurants. You I don't think like the average person would even have thought of a photography business that kind of bounces around between multiple different locations and using the model of cruise ships taking headshots. It's a phenomenal, interesting thing that you just brought to my attention. So with that, right, let's talk about like how does someone get in contact with you? Like, are you more national? Are you more local? Or do you travel?
Oh, I travel at least once a month. I'm willing to go anywhere. Last month I was both in Chicago and Vegas. I'm hitting up Miami in a couple of weeks again. I'm always looking for a new city to try out. I'm thinking California in a little bit. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I am both local, travel a lot, but if somebody's looking to get in contact with me, they can email me. If you want me to do you want me to drop my email right now?
Yeah, you drop it.
Okay, so it's Basia. It's spelled like B and then Asia at Barbosi, BARBOSI.co.
Very cool. So that and I'm still so fascinated about what you do and how you got into it. It kind of leads me to like, would you be doing what you're doing right now if money wasn't a factor?
No, no, I wouldn't be. I'm doing this because I wanted to get my foot in the door. I thought it would
Mhm.
be a wonderful way to meet people, and it was. I've met a lot of cool people just through the restaurant that I work with. I Just the other day, I had my boyfriend visiting from Chicago, and I know this older couple that owns a private plane company, like a charter company. And so we got to go on a ride on one of their private jets just for the fuck of it. We didn't, we obviously didn't go up in the air. It's too expensive to do that for free. But I've met a lot of cool people doing it, but I don't know that I would do it for free.
But I mean, to your point, you're building these like networking relationships that whatever business you decide to create in the next 5 years, you have an opportunity to reach out to women, if not for mentorship, maybe for clients.
Yes. Yeah,
Hmm.
I do.
So just look at it from this standpoint, right? If you could spend 24 hours with anyone and that person could be dead or alive, uninterrupted for that 24 hours, who would it be and why?
I don't know how many people are gonna like this answer, but Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has gone bankrupt how many times now? Three? Something like
Yes, that's
that.
part of his strategy. It seems like, yeah.
Yeah. I've heard that he's a phenomenal salesman. I would love to spend 24 hours with him and talk to him about business, talk to him about sales, and find out what he did to bounce back every single time.
Hmm. It is a controversial answer for
I know,
sure.
I know.
It is.
I'm not sitting down and talk with him because of the presidency. I'm sitting down and talk with him about business. Okay.
Yeah, and based upon the controversy, is he going to be able to respond to you about the business or not? Is the next question, right? But I mean, to your point, he has recovered, man. He has become a billionaire more than once, so
Right.
it'll definitely be interesting to sit down and to hear what he has to say. So that kind of leads me to like a more of a laid back, fun question, right? Like, if you could be a superhero, who would it be and why?
Oh, I don't know because I was never like a big superhero person. I didn't watch like Marvel or DC or anything like that, so I don't know very many of them.
Well, make up one.
But
Make up one based
but I'll
upon
give
like.
you, if I could have one superpower, it would be reading minds.
Hmm.
I'll answer you with that.
Yeah. Oh well, I mean that makes sense. I mean, as far as business goes, I mean, it'd be definitely helpful for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about your most significant achievement. I mean, obviously you're young, but you've had multiple different achievements already. If you could name your most significant one to date, which one would that be?
I would say starting my business. I think that that's kind of an obvious answer, but I would say starting my business just because I was 18 at the time. I had gone to a couple networking events. I wasn't, you know, super good at networking and talking to all of these like business owners that, they're making like six, seven figures. I have no idea. I had no idea how to talk to people like that.
Hmm.
Um, so it was from going as an employee, knowing that I didn't want to just make 30% of the sales to, okay, well, now I have to figure out how do I make the free picture? How do I make the border? Now I have to go and I have to find restaurants to talk to. I have to figure out what my ideal criteria is. I have to figure out who should I be asking for. So I would say that that's where I learned the most.
Hmm.
So
So,
I think starting this business for sure.
so just flip it on the upside down, right? As far as like the negative, and to your point, like you have to go into multiple different restaurants. Walking in cold is always a difficult thing to convince anyone. Like, what is the worst thing that you've ever experienced walking into a restaurant trying to sell them your service, but you got an asshole at the front door? How did you overcome that?
So actually the most recent and the worst experience that I've had walking into a restaurant was when I was in Vegas. And I didn't know that the owner owned four different restaurants in the area. I thought it was just the one. And he invites me up to his office. I'm talking to him. I feel like I'm this close to getting a yes. He is the owner. He owns three other places in the area. It looked like he was on board. And then he was like, oh, he barely spoke English, but he was like, oh, okay, let me take you to my general manager and talk to my general manager about this. And I go and I talk to the general manager and he's like, oh yeah, you know what, we had somebody that wanted to do this, but the other owner said no. And I was like, oh well, do you know why he said no? He's like, no, I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, is there a way for me to get in contact with him personally? He's like, no, I don't have his contact information. And I was like, do you know when he'll be in again? He's like, no, he doesn't tell me that. And I was like, okay, all right, well, you have a good night. And then I left because obviously I don't want to work with anybody that is not crazy about the idea. If they're not like, oh my gosh, this is so cool, I have to have this now, then I walk out because what's the point?
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, obviously, earlier on, you said you went into like, multiple different restaurants. Have you ever dealt with anything like sexism or ageism, knowing how young you are or that you're a female? Have you dealt with any of that negative stuff?
I have my assumptions about it was one place and I was fully convinced that I was going to get them. Um and it was a black owned restaurant and I thought I got along with them really well, but I hate to say it, but they didn't have any white employees and the whole thing was about, helping out black owned businesses and I completely understand that. I thought I was like about a 75% yes. They asked me to call back 3 days later and they have ghosted me since then. So I have a feeling because when I was there in person, they were really excited about it. And then all of a sudden they just completely went cold. So I have a feeling that that might have been the issue, which is fine. I mean, I get it. Their whole thing on their business card is supporting black owned businesses. So I get it.
Mhm.
But I think that was one thing. I mean, I'm sure that my age plays a role too. I think in general though, when it comes to talking to male business owners, I think they like that I'm a female, which I hate to say that. It feels gross and I hate using my looks to get anything, but I think that that also kind of plays a role. So there's a lot of things that go into it.
Which is crazy because I mean, like I say, you're young, so you're dealing with like these real world things on a day-to-day basis. But I mean, I think you're handling them pretty well. If let's say if there was a 16-year-old girl listening to this podcast, or maybe a 17-year-old girl, like how would you tell them to not to let that drag them down? Like how do you constantly keep overcoming them? Because again, it's going to keep happening, right? I mean, you're like you're really starting out your career, but in the next 30, 40 years, you're probably going to deal with so much BS and drama from
Yeah.
assholes to people that just don't get it. Like, how are you planning to deliver the results of your business, but still overcome those hurdles over and over again?
Honestly, having a good support system really helps. It really helps to be able to sit down and talk to somebody, be like, "Hey, listen, like things are shit right now. I feel like people are judging me for my age. I feel like people don't think that I know what I'm talking about." Yeah, honestly, having somebody to talk to. Entrepreneurship is such a lonely journey, and at least having somebody that you can bounce ideas off of or just rant to really, really helps.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, I think no matter how old you are, having someone to bounce ideas off of, and even if you become highly successful, there's always down days or down moments or down months, or you become a millionaire and then you could potentially lose becoming a millionaire. So it's always the opportunity to stay on top of things and keep your state of mind level. Because again,
Mhm.
if you go into the dark place, it's always hard to come out of it, right?
Yes.
Um, so I think another thing too is like when you're going into these restaurants, right? Are they paying for anything, or is all
No.
the revenue going to be generated from their clientele?
All the revenue is generated from their clientele. They look good because I am giving them an additional positive customer experience. I make them
Mhm,
look good by having an in-house photographer. I also play a little bit of a role in marketing because the free picture has I can show you an example.
mhm.
So this is what the free picture looks like. So it's got, their logo on it, it's got their, address and phone number and website. It has, pictures of their food on it. So it's marketing for them. Um, yeah. But they don't have to pay me for it. All they have to do is say yes to me being there and let me have a tiny little corner for my kiosk.
Hmm. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just listening. I mean, from a growth strategy standpoint, all I hear is scale, like scale, 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 scale. Because I mean, obviously, like you're thinking about like cruise ships, and you brought up that example earlier. Well, there's more than one photographer on every single cruise ship. There's one on the top. There's one in the restaurant. There's one near the pool, and they're all doing the same thing, and they're doing it on all the boats at the same time.
Mhm.
So I know you say you're not thinking about scaling, but like why did you decide to get the one employee? Because I mean that's the first step to scaling is to step back from operations and to delegate. Like why did you make that decision to hire someone?
I felt myself getting burnt out. I felt like it was just there was a lot going on. I decided to get the podcast and then I was working on the weekends as well. And it I was feeling burnt out. That's really it. And I was like, you know what? Like I think I would make more if I hired somebody than if I kept doing it myself. And I was right. As soon as I hired her, that's when my sales went back up.
Hmm. Well, I mean, you started focusing probably more on the front end of the sale funnel versus the execution of the actual work.
I guess so. Yeah, I guess so. It allowed me to just step back and relax for a second too. I was putting myself under so much pressure trying to find new locations and making sure that I was putting in 100% effort into the business on the weekends as well, maintaining relationships with the people who work at the restaurant. It just for a first time entrepreneur, it was a lot for me. And I started hating what I was doing. So I decided it might be better if I just go and I hire somebody else. I wanted to travel and I felt like I couldn't travel on the weekends. And I wanted to free up my schedule a little bit. So and it helped. If Jessica ever listens to this, shout out to Jessica. I love her. She definitely took a lot off of my plate.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I mean, going into like closing of the podcast, I like to give whoever I'm interviewing an opportunity to become the host of the Boston Cage podcast. And obviously, you already interviewed me, but I think for
Yeah.
for my listeners, it'll be good to kind of give you an opportunity to run the show for a little bit. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask me?
Yes, I would like to know what is the deeper why for what you do?
The deeper why for what I do is essentially, and I've given this variables of this answer before, but it's essentially creating a legacy. Like I said before, we have two kids that are age 17, and unfortunately, a few years ago, I had a stroke, and on my deathbed, I was realizing that I had a business, I had bank accounts, but I was not documenting or leaving the strategies of what to do with these businesses behind. And that's why I kind of started the podcast to not only tell my story, but at scale, tell multiple other entrepreneurs' journey and their stories to leave behind the breadcrumbs for my kids and their kids. Or, maybe 30 years from now, another entrepreneur will be born and have opportunity to listen to the podcast. Somebody could be 19, 15 years from now and hearing your story, they can relate to it and then they can take action to get the results.
Love it. Love it. I'm happy that I was able to come on and I was able to share my story. Thank you for having me on. I'm hoping that it helps somebody out.
I mean, I think it does. I mean, like this podcast is not just for people that are, leaving corporate America. It's not just for people that are successful entrepreneurs. It's also for people that have kids as well that may be entrepreneurs and they're scratching their heads trying to figure out what to do with them. And I think you are a good representation to like you said earlier, don't pressure them, give them the opportunities, feed into it, and let them kind of make their decisions and fumble through it a little bit and let them figure it out on their own.
Absolutely. You're not going to be able to protect your kids from mistakes that they're going to make during their entrepreneurial journey. That's something that they have to learn on their own, and they're way better off if you just back off and let them figure it out than try and step in and protect them from it.
So this right before we close out, let's talk about that for a minute. Because I mean, in your case, one of your parents was a little bit more entrepreneurial than the other. What would that look like if someone is born in a household to where both parents are entrepreneurs, both parents run their business, and let's say their kids want to be entrepreneurs? Do you think that their parents should then feed into it and give them information, or you think they should still back off as well?
Give them information when the kid asks for it. Because I had a friend and both of his parents are super entrepreneurial. They've got gas stations and restaurants and Dunkin's, and they're franchise owners. They have so much going on. And he never felt like he could go and explore what he actually wanted to explore because his parents were cramming their own businesses down his throat. So I think it's a lot better if you step back and let them explore on their own. And it's not like they don't know that their parents are entrepreneurial. It's not like they don't know that they can't go and they can't ask for help or ask for advice. I would say let them come to you.
So, and again, I keep saying this is my last one, but I mean, like the last thing you said led me to another question. So, like the reality is, okay, what you're saying is perfectly fine. I totally get that. But then we're talking about like the startup capital or the startup funding, right? So in your case, where did you get the capital to invest, to buy the cameras or to buy the printers and to get everything off the ground?
I was working. So I was saving. I've been working since I was 15, and then I started trading stocks when I was 9. I have been selling stuff on eBay since I was 7 or so. So I've been saving a lot over the years. So I had a lot of money to play. I didn't have a lot of money to play with, but I had a decent amount to play with. So I just kind of used that. I also waited to buy equipment until I had a place that told me yes already. So I knew that if I bought, it was only $3,000 worth of stuff. So if I bought $3,000 worth of stuff, I knew it wasn't going to be for no reason. I knew I had a place to put it. So, but I was working, and that's the money that I used. So I never borrowed from my parents or anything. I always tried really hard not to borrow money from parents. I feel bad borrowing money. So I like to come up with all of it myself.
It's very cool. I mean, I think this was definitely an inspiring episode because, again, the fact of your age, but like you're responsive, you know what you want, you know what you're doing, but at the same time, you still want to live life as well. So you're not completely consumed by being overly successful, but at the same time, you're going to be because that's in your nature to be who you are, right? So I definitely appreciate you being on the show today. I think the Streetcam Boss is definitely a good title to start with for now, but obviously I think 5 years from now, if I have opportunity to interview you again, you'll probably have a new name.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. It might even be 2 years from now. We'll see.
Great. Well, to the listener, again, if you're listening to this episode right now, or maybe later on today, this is one episode that I would like you to kind of re-listen to, because again, you may have a kid in your house that you may want to play this episode for them so they can kind of see the opportunities that are out there. And to the boss's credit, I mean, it was an opportunity that we didn't even think about. Like, who would have thought about using and leveraging what you do on a cruise ship at a restaurant? So I definitely appreciate you being here, and I look forward to following your journey and see what you do in the next 2, 5, 10 years.
Thank you so much for having me on this. I really appreciate it.
Great. S.A. Grant.